Welcome to the 7th and last episode of Eyes East, our series about the recovery of Christchurch's eastern flatland suburbs. Over the course of the series, we've explored the most popular ideas that have come out of the community for the recovery and regeneration of the East. While there are many great ideas, they can be overwhelming if we can't see how they might fit into the bigger picture. So how can we make sense of it all? I met with Professor Mick Abbott, architect Jason Mill, geotech engineer Don Bruggers, and Eastern Vision's program manager Evan Smith to try and do just that. We've heard a lot of information about the proposals for the Eastern Flatlands. Why is it really important to integrate these into the bigger picture?
And it just makes sense to tie everything together into a big integrated plan so it all works together. Otherwise you end up with just isolated blocks, people trying to do things, and there's no marriage between any of the parties working together.
It's a bit like a giant jigsaw where the individual pieces don't mean much separately, but once you put it all together you get the big picture, and that's when it starts making sense.
The bigger picture is actually the river and the possibility it presents for the whole city.
We've seen a lot of the master planning and sort of the big blueprint planning we've seen from government, but often there's no integration across those plans, or they're very ring fenced.
And I think it's really critical as well in terms of integration, to ensure that all the different parties and agencies are collaborating together, working together. So you've got housing people talking to the sport and recreation, people talking to the education, people talking to the environmentalists. So all the different plans fit together and they act as one. So you get to end up with the whole being more than just the sum of the parts.
How do you see the red zone ideas integrating together?
With the red zone, there's been groups like Avanataka Network working since the red zoning decisions, and working with all the different people that have put ideas on the table as to what could happen in the red zone, and making sure that they sit down together and are not competing for the same piece of territory within the red zone. When we went out to the community with Evo Space last year, we asked people, is this the ideal place for this kind of concept, or would you rather it was moved somewhere else in the red zone or somewhere else in the east? And by and large, people were very comfortable with where things were sited.
So we've tried to assist Evan and his crew with some of the technology that we were using with Sarah in the city to visualise the blueprint. So as groups have come through Evo Space and come up with these ideas, we've been able to get supplied with images of what they could possibly look like and start piecing them together, so we see how these things will link together.
And this is where the integrated planning all comes into play, because you've got these pockets and you can move them around and make them all tie together. And that's why it's so key that everybody talks together and we get a big plan for the whole area.
And in many ways the river in the past has been just a sort of a transport corridor with roads on either side, and what you see there now is actually the river sort of spreading out. The banks are more meaningful, they're not just places to walk, but there's all sorts of activities become possible. And so what it's doing is sort of creating a generosity in Christchurch about how it can be along the Avon rather than just how it can walk along the Avon.
The Red Zone corridor isn't just a connector between the CBD and New Brighton and the coast. When some geography research students did some surveys of some of the communities in the east, they found what was more important to them, rather than the cycleway from the city to the sea, was actually all the lateral connections that allowed the kids to go safely to school across the river, and allowed all those connections across the river, and so those communities became connected again, whereas at the moment they're very disconnected because of the red zone no man's land.
Specifically, we've been looking at New Brighton, so we're sort of the end of this corridor. As you can see, this recreational corridor stretching out to the sea, and so that people coming out to utilise these venues are also using the village, or they're actually enjoying this environment so much they're living back out here. And then with this recreational facility, we can look at higher density because we've got that outdoor living, because we've got that recreation.
What could jeopardise this integration?
It's absolutely critical that the communities indicate via whatever consultation processes what they would like to see happen, and then for all the organisations that have the ability and the means to make things happen to all work together on an agreed shared vision for the whole of the East that the community has agreed with.
I feel we need to be very innovative in how we approach this. I mean, we've got a canvas here that we can create something really wonderful for Christchurch and from the CBD all the way out to New Brighton. And so there's a big opportunity here for being very creative and innovative in how we approach this.
Yeah, we actually have had some quite creative legislation in Christchurch around the SERA Act that is now becoming the Regeneration Act, and we have this Development Christchurch body looking at the east and to how they can push that through. And it is extraordinary legislation. Some of the stuff we're talking here would take decades through our normal planning means, so we have to utilise it. We have to take advantage of it.
And I know that there's been the terminology bandied about public-private partnerships and agreements made between local governments and private developers and federal governments and so forth. But there are models out there which are being currently used throughout the world where this does work. As far as the geotechnical issues, you talked about the soil conditions and whatever through this area. There is technology available in the world today, not necessarily here in Christchurch right now, but it can be made available for large-scale land remediation to remediate this land very economically. And you can pick and choose what you remediate. You don't have to do the whole thing.
But there are ways around the interface between the red zone and the green zone where you can feather the edge rather than have straight edges. You can have a convoluted type edge which increases the amount of houses that can have immediate access to the amenity. You can look at rezoning that fringe around the green zone, between the green zone and the red zone, to allow increased density of housing, which will improve the value of the properties that lie in that interface as well, which has been one of the issues that people living in that TC3 area have had. So there are things that need to be explored, I think, further. There's also good land adjacent to the red zone land for building on that maybe we should be considering land swaps with some of the golf courses and other green spaces that are there. Let's look at how it could be done so that we reduce the risks, we allow all the space that we need to mitigate other risks, but also increase the overall population of the east to support, have enough rate space there to support some of these developments.
But a lot of it comes down to creating a good trusting relationship with some developers that have some money, outside sources that want to come in, but they're not going to want to come unless there's an integrated plan.
What other opportunities exist to increase the financial return for the government?
Well, I think if we take a whole of Christchurch view, what you can see there is the airport is where people currently are flying in and flying out. We've shifted from being a gateway to being a transit lounge. And I think the huge opportunity is to actually invest in this so that we support, that relationship to nature that New Zealand's known for in our city.
Yeah, personally, I see the importance of the integration is that it's going to heal the east. It really is the side of town that got hit the worst, and I think by healing the east, we'll heal the whole city. And so we're not just integrating the east, we're sort of integrating our city back again.
So we need a clear vision and an integrated plan for the future of the east. Coming up, we explore the challenges and the means to making this happen.